Okay, so in this video, I'm going to walk you through how to take your Porsche Cayenne key, an original, say like this, that's fairly worn and beat up for 14 years old, and we're going to put a new casing on it. We're going to take all the guts out and hopefully get it into something more like this that's working and functional. Okay, so this is a kit that I ordered off eBay. I got two sets, two fob shells, and this is what's included is obviously the front and the back. You know, there's no emblem here, but there is a location for it, so I'm hoping we can add that. The front and the back shells, as I mentioned, it does have the metal there needed for the panic button, but that is the only component that comes with it. Otherwise, everything else is going to have to transfer over from the original fob. One thing to note if you're ordering this is whether you have a so this is a 1 and 2 plus panic button setup. There are some out there that have a 1, 2, 3 plus panic button, and apparently some do not have the panic button. So just make sure you're ordering the right method for you, because it will relate to the number of pins on the inside that are going to actuate on the circuit board. The other part we have here is the key blade and the key blade retainer. Now, what you can do in some cases is knock out that centering pin there, which will allow the blade to remove from the body, as obviously this is an uncut blade. Do the same on your original fob, and then be able to swap it over. The problem I ran into doing my first one is that the blade stem here is not the same dimensions as the OEM, and so they were not easily interchangeable. But we'll get into that a little bit more. You also get the release button that you need and the spring. Okay, so here we are. We've got the OEM fob, and as I may have mentioned before, this is one of the reasons for this whole thing is that Porsche does not make these easy to get into and swap over. This basically is kind of a sealed unit, with the exception of the back panel for the battery, and that is actually the first thing that we need to do. We need to pop the battery out gently. You're not sending it flying. So battery out, and then we can get into cracking this open. So what I've got here is a set of split ring pliers, and I chose them. I came across them because of the spreading action that I can do. What I found is if I insert them right here into this portion of the key body, and then gently pry. I need to flip that over. That gives me the right method. It's not gentle, but it works to get it started. And then you just simply go with a screwdriver of your choosing, a flat blade, something similar. Don't jab your hand, and work this the rest of the way open. Now, I am particular, and I will try and get this open in as much as one piece as I can, but that may or may not be entirely possible. I think I just did all that prying off camera. And then you want to also be careful of your circuit board on the inside. You don't want to accidentally get it. So we'll go as gingerly as we can here, but the ultimate goal is to get it apart. Okay, so now we're starting to get these back tabs are definitely the trickiest part here. They don't want to come out. They're generally well wedged in there, but it's overall I actually did a little better than my first one. We got them out in one piece. So see, this is the ground terminal for the battery that we're going to want to get. So we're going to remove that. Here it just slides out. Just be careful. It's a soft metal. It's pretty ginger. Now that we're pretty much done with. Okay, so here you are left with the inner main shell, and what you can see, there's a tab here as well as down here, and this one's broken away, so you got a little bit of wiggle in this one. That will explain maybe why you're even if you had the button, your panic button may not work. So we're just going to basically see if we can turn that over. There we go. Now you might need to do a little prying gently, but you want to be careful. This is your circuit board. Don't want to crack it. And on this side, you hear your 3 active items. Now, the thing I find interesting is I am a 2-button remote, yet I have 3 buttons. What I found out on my original is that this just basically duplicates the trunk button behavior. Okay, so we've got the original fob apart now. These parts are from the original. These are all the replacement portions, as well as here we've got our circuit board and that negative terminal. One thing I wanted to point out is with the comparison between these two. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera real well, but the OEM part certainly is a little better. It's got a little more weight to it. It's a nicer casting, cleaner, a little more refined, and so it, just I think lends itself to smoother operation. As I mentioned before, the stem on these, so when you knock this pin out, the key blade itself will pull out from the head. You would think it'd be great if they would just be interchangeable, bada bing, bada boom. The fact of the matter is the stem here, the shank, if you want to call it, is slightly different dimension. It's a little narrower and a little thinner, so the original being thicker won't fit in to the retaining head. Then the next problem that creates is in the main casing. So this is the portion here where the key head rides on and swivels on, and this ring, as it were, is not as nicely refined, and you can maybe see it there from where these two parts of plastic, the clear and the black, meet. There's some slop and some residue over. So what ends up happening is that when you use the original head and put it in place, it doesn't ride as cleanly. In fact, it doesn't fit over quite right. So I don't know if you can see that gapping there that's occurring, but it has it off kilter, and also just generally won't seat properly. So what we're going to have to do is file and sand this down a little bit. Now I've done this previously on my on the original first unit I did, so I kind of learned that I'm just going to jump straight to the Dremel. But the other thing you can do or have done is use a nail file. This is just some emery board. I previously wrapped it in some automotive sandpapers. Like this is 2000 grit. What I ended up finding was this was just a little too delicate, too dainty, and it just I need to be a little more aggressive. But I'd recommend ease into it in your comfort level. The last thing you want to do is blow this apart, and then you're left stranded high and dry. And then on the opposite side, there's a similar top seating portion. You can see here, and a little bit, it was, in my case, it was in better shape. So I'll give it a little bit of dressing, but nothing too heavy, maybe just more to help it move and seat properly. Okay, the other component worth noting here is the button, and this is the replacement one that we've got. And I don't know if it's going to show up well on camera or not, but what you can see is there already is some chunking, some gouging in it. It's not the most refined piece in casting, and these can be tricky when they're little, but it also can be a sign that the mold they're using is worn out, or they're just not paying a lot of attention to detail. Problem is there's a little bit of ridge around here, and what that does, it inhibits its ability to move up and down when you press it and release with the spring for it to work smoothly. So we'll probably end up using the OEM unit again, mostly because it fits this key head best. I found, unfortunately, it's part of why I was replacing it. It's a little worn out. The chrome's gone. We're down to the I can't remember if it's copper or bronze underneath for the chrome, but c'est la vie. It'll do the trick. It'll do the job. I won't be that picky. The nice thing is they give you another spring. What I found here in the original, actually, this one's not in great shape. You can see it's a little bit cockeyed, which does play into it, because as you push that button, it needs to go down on the little stem here, and you want to have a smooth travel so it doesn't bind and create. So again, that OEM piece is in very good shape, so we may end up using that. And there's a little bit of trick to that I'll show you later. We got to preload it when we reassemble. So I'm going to crack out the Dremel. We're going to go at this. I'll probably put it in, if I can, into high speed mode for you or something, so you can watch that. Okay, so just real quick with the Dremel here, this is the little sanding wheel I've got. This is 120 grit paper on here, and that's primarily what I'll use, but I've also got this little grinding polishing tip. Be honest, I don't know what the grit is on it. Ideally, I'd like to have one of these that was just straight shape, had the same profile as this guy, but a little narrower, just so they could run and maintain that ridge edge around that ring nice and square, perpendicular to the face. But we'll work with what we got here. Okay, so we got the Dremel fitted up here. Just another note, I'm going to be running this on the lowest RPM speed possible, just so it doesn't get away from me or chew up. Okay, so this is just a little little razor blade type kit that I've got here. I'm just going to use that to clean up this edge a little more. Try and refine it, keep it nice and clean. Try our first test fit. See how that goes. And there we go. That's pretty good. What you're going to have to do is feel for the amount of friction that you get. You really want this to be pretty loose and free for that spring to be able to action it properly. So I'm also just doing this, moving it back and forth to wear it in, work it down, create a little heat, soften that plastic and get it going. Another thing you could do is put a tiny bit of lubricant in there, maybe a little white lithium grease, or I used a little bit of dry moly, which I applied on the inside of this, and that did seem to help a fair bit, just to get it broken in, that type of thing. Now the next part here is to use the other half, because you're going to end up having these clamped together and eventually glued. You want to make sure that they're going to play nice together. Okay, so I've got that initially clipped together. I didn't load up the spring, obviously, so it created a little problem, but it's moving pretty good. Not quite as free as I might like, so I think I might take the Dremel to it just gently one more time, removing the emery board. But I think I'm overall going to be pretty happy with that. That's clamped together pretty nice and tight, and as you see, it rides quite well. All right, much better. I'm fairly happy with that. It seems to be loose enough that I think is going to do the trick, but not so loose that it's sloppy. So we will go forward with. We'll now get the electronics in here and move to the next phase for you. Okay, so I was running into a little problem there, and it's with the little lever here that works as for the actuating the panic button. What it is the replacement one here is a little narrower, and what it means is it sits below when you put the circuit board in. It doesn't engage the button for the panic at quite the right height, and actually blocks it a bit. So what I've done is I've taken out the OEM lever, and I'm going to utilize that. So we'll put this back. So basically all the guts that came with the shells, these replacement shells, I'm ending up not using. But that's okay, as long as you know, all the more reason, just make sure you get that OEM fob apart in reasonable shape to the point where you can also maintain the parts so you don't misplace them and lose them. So hopefully this fits in here as it should. There's no other conflicts, and that looks pretty good. So there we go, much better. You can hopefully see the engagement there. It is now flush with the switch rather than above it, and then when we push, that will activate it. Annoying. Okay, so with that seated properly, now we can go on to assembling the switch mechanism, the lever mechanism. You got to note that the spring has a little tab on the one end of it that goes in right here beside the clear part. Then we're going to load our cap on, and when you turn that, should feel it drop down and engage, and now when you turn it, it twists the spring. It should kind of lock in. We're going to take our headpiece, we're going to line it up, and you'll note there's a little indexing tab there button, which is here on the front end, so we're going to line that up the right way. Drop this over the wings all the way down. Okay, there we go. And now we got to preload this, so we're going to turn it a couple times to do the trick. We shouldn't really have to force it a ton. Pardon my big ugly hands here. And then we're going to hold it down in place with it preloaded, and that should be pretty good all in. Now we're going to slide our back on, and just make sure you keep holding that key in, down and in. It wants to pop, that is for sure. Okay, there we go. We're put together. Let's try it out. You can push the button, and we're not getting any release here. So what's going on? So it's definitely lock engaging. I'd say there's maybe too much friction. Oh, there we go. Just needed a little bit of coaxing. But what you can see is I've had to back off the amount of pressure I've got on it. So it's definitely binding. So I think what I'll have to do is go back and do a little more sanding. And this is just a little bit of the back and forth you got to do to refine it out. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this back piece and the negative terminal for the battery that's not sitting there, I'm just going to use a little dab of glue to get it to stick. So I've got this Gorilla Glue. One of the things it suggests is that you need to damp the area first. I guess that's part of the activation for this particular glue. Damp that area a little bit. Try not to soak it. And I'm not going to put that much glue down, to be dead honest with you. I'm going to go with the little dab will do ya. So there we go. That should do the trick. We'll give that a couple minutes to tack up, but I think overall that should work for our needs. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to add a little bit of dry moly lubricant. So what I've done is taken a cute cotton swab here, just doused it in dry moly from my spray so I don't get it all over everything. I'm just going to put it in here. This dries, and it basically acts like a film lubricant, as it says. So just give it a little bit of extra help in making sure everything moves and behaves properly. In fact, we'll put a little bit on some of this again just to help make sure. I'm going to stay away from that clear part. Sorry, I'm going to stay away from the clear part there. Don't want to obscure that. Have it looking nice, but then those will just take a moment to dry out, and then we should be good for assembly. Okay, so we're ready for final assembly with the glue. I've got Gorilla Glue here, so what I'm using, but there's a whole bunch of different ones you could use. I'm just going to open it up here so I'm ready. Now, like I said before, this stuff suggests damping an area, especially a non-porous area. I think the moisture essentially helps the glue set up. So what I've got here is a Q-tip or a cotton swab that I've just taken the one end, I've pulled a lot of the fuzz off. I've just shaved it down so I can use it almost like a little mini paintbrush. Just get in and I'll just damp some of all these areas here. Now, I would suggest you want to pick... So I'm not a fan of necessarily gluing this down for bare, just in the event that you ever had to get back into it. You don't want to make it so stuck together that it's impossible to get apart again. Kind of along lines. So I'm gonna do some glue here in the corners where I think it's important to hold it, and in this area here I'll go pretty much, I won't say solid or heavy through, but because that's an area you want to hold true for that spring mechanism. There's gonna be a lot of resistance there. Up here in this corner again, and a little bit down this side. I'm gonna try not to overdo it. Okay, and then it's basically just back to same thing as the dry fit. Hopefully it goes just as smoothly. Oh, well, that's one sorry. That is one thing. Pick your work location carefully. I did have my finger slipped, the spring sprung, and the little button here went flying on me, and it gave me a good 2 hours of searching to find it in the garage. So I maybe didn't pick the best work environment here for this. So you want to be somewhere where it's clean and tidy. If you have a mishap, you can find stuff. I'm not sure if I'm going to get... Squeeze that down. There we go, and again we'll give it a try. Works nice like butter. Gotta love it. Okay, so all I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to grab a couple of simple spring clamps. Clamp one on here gently. Nothing too forceful. It doesn't need to be ridiculous. Just to hold it in place so it doesn't start walking out on you. Give this a little squeeze at the back. Make sure it's the way you want. I'm going to put another one on the back. No battery in here, so if it's activating the button, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to do any harm. Okay, there we go. That's going to sit. Sorry if I'm flopping all over. That's going to sit nice, and we're just going to let it rest for, well, this stuff's a 24-hour setup. So there you have it. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the comment section. If there's anything I haven't covered, I can link to different stuff where I got the keys and that, but they're all over eBay and Amazon and things like that. Pretty easy to find. Like I say, just watch for the right button configuration that you need, match it up. Yeah, and give it a whirl. I mean, you can always play with the empty shell first, get a feel for it before you start tearing yours apart. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in down below, and I'll do my best to answer everything. Throw it a like if it was useful to you, or if you think it's something you might be able to attempt now on your own. And feel free to ask questions. If there's something else along these lines or similar that you'd like me to try and review or put together or assemble, please let me know.